night. It's extraordinary. Not having my cat Bay around the place. But all this stuff about Laurence Fox and Dan Wootton and Ava Evans is sort of preying on my mind, and it's all linked to this thing of GB News. I think there've been 4 investigations, or there are 4 investigations ongoing about GB News. One of them is actually into Laurence Fox's Reclaim show, and it's all about bias. I think there's every reason, there's every value in an opinion piece. My stuff is just an opinion piece. I'm not a source of the news. I'm a source of a reflection, and of course I have a bias. I try to be. I try to project some sort of civilized balance, but I have no intention of aping the BBC and avoiding my opinion. My opinion is all I can offer. If you want the news, you really have to go to a mainstream media outlet. But I find it extraordinary that there are so many people who expect you to belong to one tribe or another, and I try very hard not to be tribal. And I wouldn't want to get caught up in the Farage thing, where Farage talks about the finger of blame lying with the Khalistan separatist movement. It's outrageous that he is given a slot to pontificate in such a discriminatory way, and there are so many issues at the moment with the Sikh community in the UK, in Canada, and it's a tinderbox, and it's not helped by Farage's eclectic bitterness. Farage, Rees-Mogg, Lee Anderson, Nadine Dorries, Esther McVeigh. Who knows of her except in her former incarnation as a TV presenter? All of these failed politicians, clinging on to their desperation to pontificate to any audience, particularly an audience that is as tribal as the GB News audience. As for Ava Evans' experience, I think this is extraordinary. I'd probably come back and look at another one if I can't go to sleep. Carol Vorderman said there seems to be no bar low enough at the moment, and certainly GB News is pandering to the I was going to say pandering to the gallery, but they're pandering to the pit. I thought you only kept musicians in the pit. They're in the pit for a reason, but it's not good enough just simply to apologise. I happen to think that Ava Evans' piece on the Politics Live was maladroit, was badly handled. I think the rest of her interviews, the rest of her pieces in that programme were undeniably excellent. She's a superb journalist. And I like Politics Joe. I think it's an interesting outlet. But in this case, when the fellow brought up the issue of male suicide, I think it was important that there was time given to it and that it was treated with a lot more respect and thought. Instead, Ava Evans approached it in a perfectly legitimate way. She approached the issue of the Minister for Men. I don't think that was the time to be doing that, and I think it wasn't really her fault. I think it was the fault of the BBC producers. When you do a show on television, you are produced out of this world. You have 2 or 3 people constantly talking to you about what you're going to say. So by the time you say it, it's old hat. And some people can do it well, some people can't do it well. I find it really irritating being asked again and again and again what I'm going to say or what I want to say. Really the issue is, they prefer to have everything written down. Well, why not? Why not? But then they think the spontaneity, after having wrecked the spontaneity with so much production, is going to be so significant. Well, spontaneity is spontaneity. And rehearsal is rehearsal. And if you want to rehearse, then you need to learn the lines. And the latest story confirms my suspicion that Laurence Fox had been produced, and the words which he said had been approved already, and probably learned. I mean, he's an actor, he knows how to learn lines. So I think there's a lot of stuff to regret about this particular issue, but at the same time, you've got to ask what is going on here in British media, because it's not just Russell Brand or Dan Wootton or Laurence Fox or Philip Schofield or Hugh Edwards. It's the decay of, I think, basic civility, and the decay of image, mixed up with this extraordinary veneration of media. Why? Because there is nothing else to venerate. Religion has gone, and politics has proven to have feet of clay. Where else are people going to look? They're going to look to the media, and the media has always been wanting. It's just, I think, people haven't noticed. And now the focus is on the media. People are understandably disappointed. Of course they're disappointed. The media is trite. The media is insubstantial. But when the government fails, when the opposition fails to hold the government to account, the media becomes more important. The media is given a priority which I think it finds very difficult to shoulder. And we get to see it in all its gory inadequacy. And it is inadequate. Can the media be any better? Can the media really... Well, not in this country, I think. There are occasions where we have extraordinary media sensations, and the media leads the debate. But it is rare. Ours is not a media-led nation. I think countries I've been in, like particularly like Russia, I think Italy sometimes, these are media-led nations. These are nations where the media dictates policy. I don't think it's something that happens often in the UK. And as a result, I think when the media gets the spotlight on it, it's not quite sure what to do. We've got a healthy media, we've got a free media, but it's also a fairly chaotic media. and chaos and corruption and inadequacy, these things go together. Why? Because they're not wholesome, they're not whole, they're separate, they're independent. It's very difficult to listen to Fox and his Reclaim Party and his desperation about culture wars and to fight the things that we have been standing against and all that sort of stuff, and not think actually he just wants to be back in front of a camera. And it's a desperation for limelight rather than for something that he's got to say. He made a mistake on Question Time, and it's plunged him into a chaos where he's out of his depth and he's buddying up with people who are fundamentally dirty, nasty people. And he's becoming a dirty, nasty person by association. I find that really sad. I know members of his family. They're significantly more worthwhile than what we're seeing at the moment. And his desperation for headlines and being pandered to by producers who tell him what to say or sit on the side. Oh yes, that's very good, Laurence. That's very good. That will punch above your weight. And yeah, but they're there. These producers should be there to challenge what he says, not to pussyfoot around and try to get him to stick his head in a noose, which is what he's done. And I don't think he has the capacity to see the difference at the moment. I think it's really sad. Whereas Dan Wootton has years of running around the place in the media world and being scurrilous. He knew exactly what was happening there, and he presided over it like the Mad Hatter. It was a disgusting display of smirky
The biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. That is an arresting statistic, and if that doesn't warrant specific attention, mental health is an umbrella issue.
I have to say that is also because women are unsuccessful. That is a lot of feeds into that statistic.
But it feels like, it just doesn't feel like you've got any space for this idea that men might have unique challenges that face them. And the problem is, even as I'm saying this, in my mind, it's like I've got out the violin, and I don't want to be.
Read the book.
I don't want to be.
It's one of the anchors in the Zohar, in Jewish mysticism. In Kabbalism, there's an idea that marriage is a perfect union. Now, you're not two people, you're one. And the problems occur when you try and become two people again, or when you try and play your individuality rather than your cohesive union. And we only have individuality in the UK. In other countries, there is a sense of cohesive union that the media, that the newspapers, that investigative journalists are focused on one goal, and that they have been trained, and that they're terribly proud of their position as journalists. I don't think we have that. We have such an eclectic mishmash of people, from journalists who've become media stars like Piers Morgan to media stars like Laurence Fox, who've become journalists, and to people who've moved from social media into mainstream media, and back in the other direction. we have a very strange and eclectic media. And we also have very poor oversight. Ofcom is a disaster. And it's taken me years to realise this. But the more I've looked into reality TV and the more I've tried to speak to people, the more I've realised this is not an organ for change. This is a self-serving, onanistic organ that, and the organ player is the Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, or whatever way that is divvied up today. Who cares? Because the Secretary of State is insubstantial and simply using the Secretariat as a stepping stone to power. And this has been the case for most of the 13 holders of that ministry during the current